Are you preparing for a product security interview and looking for typical questions and answers? This is the right place to get some. I will walk you through how I run my interviews. I will tell you exactly what I'm looking for in candidates, and especially what sets apart the top performers. It's not only what you know, but much more importantly, how you think, how you speak, and whether I can trust you to solve real-world problems. My name is Florian Nöding, and I'm a principal security architect. I've got 15 years of experience in the tech industry and 6 of them in security. So I know a couple of things about this. Let's get started. Probably prepare for an interview, you need to, of course, understand the expectations of the interview. So let me tell you what I'm looking for. I'm looking to find a candidate that is a great match for the position I have available. And I'm going to look at different dimensions of the candidate. For example, if they have the necessary technical skill, I will make sure that they have a solid enough understanding of security. Obviously, we are talking product security here. But also that they have a good enough understanding of software engineering, so that they understand how systems are built and what it takes to secure them. I've put empathy in this category. This might be surprising, and I don't mean empathy in the sense, sorry, software engineering guy, that you have to fix a security issue, but rather empathy in the sense that you truly understand what you're asking for if you want a security control to be implemented. That you understand how these different layers of software fit together, how they create risk, and how you can reduce risk and what it costs to address these risks. I want that you communicate well, because you will be talking to lots of people. Security is a highly collaborative discipline. So I'm looking for precise and nuanced language so that you can clearly communicate what needs to happen and to different stakeholders at that. I'm going to check for potential because you will be filling a role today, but what will you do in a year or two when you've grown? How much do I believe can you grow? How much curiosity do you have? And that is a pretty big predictor for lots of great outcomes. Can you ask good questions? Can you clarify situations? Can you listen to me as the interviewer, and can you listen to a software engineer or a team or another stakeholder? And most importantly, can you solve real-world problems? And in the interview, I will provide you with an example problem that is as close as possible to a real-world situation. Most interviews also cover behavioral aspects. Are you a cultural fit for the team or company? And how do you resolve conflicts between people? But also, how do you make trade-offs, whether to implement a security control or you rather say, team, please build more features? My interviews are conversations. I don't do trivia contests, so I just don't want to know that you know all these things, because nobody knows all these things. This is a very, very broad range of topics to cover. And I don't know everything either. And of course, I will level set the expectations. So for an entry-level role, a mid-career or a late career, a senior or even a staff plus role have wildly different expectations. My interview is usually a 45-minute session. I will first spend 5 minutes on an introduction, and the purpose of this is to get to know each other a little bit. Of course, I will have read your resume, but I will introduce myself, and if you're nervous, I'll help you calm down by asking me really simple stuff, and we'll just chat a moment. Then we have about 35 minutes split into 2 blocks, question 1 and question 2, roughly 15 to 20 minutes each, where I will cover 2 big areas, and then 5 minutes of questions for yourself to ask me or the interviewer. So let's discuss questions to assess technical skill. My basic idea is I want to understand how deep can you go with me, how deep and broad is your understanding. And I can cover quite a surprising amount of vulnerabilities, weaknesses, and best practices by using this approach to form a basic understanding how much technical skill you have. Of course, it's not perfect. It's only a proxy for the real thing. But, well, interviewing is a bit more arts and science, of course. So how do I do it? Let's say we'll discuss SQL injection as a practical example. Then I will ask you, what is SQL injection? And only if you know that, I will ask the follow-up question. If you don't know it, I'll look another area where you are stronger, because I want you to be successful in this interview, of course. I will ask you next, why does SQL injection happen? And I'm trying to figure out if you have an understanding of how SQL injection in source code looks like. That usually some string concatenation is happening here, maybe via a string builder or another means, but still string concatenation as the foundation. If it's more an offensive security role in the product security scope, I will ask you how to exploit it. And we'll discuss how to write user input that could lead to SQL injection and exploit it and grant access to the database. I will, for the more defensive roles, ask you how to mitigate it. And I want to hear things about control characters that need to be escaped. But that is certainly not the thing that software engineers should usually do. Instead, they should rely on parameterized queries. How do these look like in code? Or maybe the alternative, an object relational mapping system, which is also a fine answer, but parameterized queries is really important here. It is very surprising that many product security engineers don't know the answer to the question 2 and don't have enough details about question 3 here. So and that especially sets apart the junior from the more senior folks, or maybe mid-level rather. So once we've discussed this, we need to discuss edge cases, because SQL queries sometimes need to be created in a dynamic fashion. For example, if you have a website, a commerce website, where you can list different products, you maybe want them by price, or you want to filter, and that means the SQL needs to be parameterized at runtime. How do you deal with this edge case to still guarantee that it's secure? And that is something that I'm surprised in early career folks. So you will definitely stand out if you know that. And I expect it certainly at the senior level. Now we are entering the staff plus and principal territory. How to mitigate a SQL injection at scale. That means not only for a single part of a product, but an entire product, or maybe many products, or all products across an enterprise. I'm looking here for a discussion how you will rely on other parts of the security organization to scale your work. Can you work with the vulnerability management team to figure out, does it actually matter? Is this the right thing that we should fix at scale? Can you work with a platform engineering team and a static code analysis team to find these issues at scale, to nudge developers in the right direction, and to use or build them first secure by design libraries as a paved road, so that you can shift down the security work to a library that is centralized and accidents no longer happen, and you basically have eliminated this class of vulnerabilities. Stuff like that is really exciting on that level. And what is really interesting is the deeper I can go in the more areas, that tells me you have a whole lot of depth and breadth too. And it implies that you had curiosity, because most of these things are not taught. You really have to be curious to look for them actively and figure out all these things. So that really gives me a picture about your growth potential too. While I'm asking you these questions about technical depth, I'm also looking at communication and how you use language. And let me give you an example for a vague answer to these questions. For example, what is SQL injection? And an answer that I would give myself as a security expert. And let's remember, during an interview, you're talking to a security expert, or you might be asked to formulate a question for a specific group of stakeholders. So a very vague answer would be for the question, what is SQL injection? SQL injection is when you put weird stuff into a box in a website. The website gets confused and then that's bad stuff. It's really bad, basically. That doesn't help me as a security expert to understand what's going on. If I would explain this situation to you, I instead would define SQL injection as a SQL injection vulnerability occurs when code and data are mixed without proper escaping of control characters in the user control data. And the consequence of that is that application logic gets bypassed and an adversary gets either partial or full control over the database. I may also provide additional context of blind versus non-blind injection and stuff like that. Look at these two different ways of wording the same thing. Try to target the second description because the interviewers are usually security experts. So talk in nuance. I have, of course, different expectations here. If you're entry level versus you're senior or even a Steph Plus. And don't memorize it. That is really, really important. Don't memorize what my answers that I just gave. What I'm really looking for is that you understand these concepts and can talk in them, can talk about them in different contexts. Because only then, if you truly understand things, you can apply them in different situations. And that is what I'm truly looking for, and not that you can memorize the answers. To figure out how much potential you have, I'm asking exactly this question most of the time. And for product security engineers, it goes like this. You've been assigned to help a team building a new login process for the entire company. What do you do to make it secure enough? This question is very ill-defined. So I first want that you ask me clarifying questions. What are we actually building? What kind of components, like client-side, server-side, are involved in the database? Once we've also agreed on a basic understanding of the tech stack, and I'll usually give the candidates the choice here, so you can choose if you prefer NoSQL or SQL. Let me know. We'll do that. And that, of course, comes with the expectation that you know about your preferred tech stack a little bit more security-wise than other things. So I want to see your strengths here. That is how I do that. And how this also becomes a nice conversation, as I mentioned earlier. Once we've figured out what we are building, the next step is figuring out what could go wrong. And I want to see which areas do you prioritize. Do you first start with infrastructure, application security, or product security concerns? Do you very early discuss things that are likely highly relevant? For example, in this context, cross-site scripting and SQL or NoSQL injections? Or do you discuss at length post-quantum cryptography and other such things that are probably not as relevant? And they are much easier and more likely weaknesses that we should eliminate first. I will also ask you, or rather tell you that the team has made some suboptimal, from my perspective, tech stack decisions. Maybe for historic reasons, they are used to building websites using jQuery. Is that an appropriate choice for such a project? Or would you rather prefer a different approach, for example, React or Angular, which are secure by design and eliminate cross-site scripting? Do we need more defense in depth, like content security policies? How do we mitigate cross-site request forgery? And a whole lot of other issues here. And at the end, we'll sum it up a little bit to figure out how do you prioritize these different things? Where do you really draw a hard line and say, this must be done now before we can release to production, or some things that have more time? Also, how do you balance business aspects, for example, password complexity and multi-factor authentication requirements compared to the needs of the specific situation here and the customer base, of course. So there's a whole lot of stuff that you cover. For more entry-level folks, I will guide you a lot through this process. So while this is a hard question, I will help you through it. And I just want to see that you can work with me, that you go through the journey. Also that you sometimes tell me, I don't know. Because if you can't say that when I bring you to the edge of your understanding, that's not good. That tells me that you, in other situations, you might make stuff up. And I don't like that at all. Just tell me that you don't know. I'll move on, and I might even explain it to you. We've got enough time for stuff like that. And then we'll move to another area where you're hopefully stronger. For senior folks, this should be fairly straightforward. You're doing this probably all the time, so you're experienced. For Staff Plus level, just like with the technical dev questions, mitigation at scale, I'll ask you the same here, but in a way how you break down the problem so that you can delegate the problem to multiple people? How do you use different parts of the security organization to get this under control? And things like that. Cybersecurity is fundamentally a discipline where you have to work with lots of people. So it's not only a technical problem, it's really a people problem. And to figure out whether you are a fit for the company, for the company's culture, the hiring manager and maybe some of the other interviewers as well will ask you behavioral questions. While I'm mostly focused on doing the technical aspects and potential, this is also important to prepare. And the questions are usually in the form, tell me about a time when you, and then here are a couple examples, had a conversation that didn't go well. What was the situation? What was the task that you were working on? What was the action and what was the result in this stuff? Or tell me about a time when you had to give someone critical feedback. And especially when that went wrong or when it went really well. Tell me about a time or tell me about something where you have been very successful and you've been really proud of this situation. And talk about these things. Prepared. These are probably the hardest questions. They are more asked at the very largest companies and not at the smaller companies. And one that I usually ask, this is the last one here, and we already had it in the open-ended question, by the way. Tell me about a time when you had to choose between security and product features, because that always happens. And I want to see how you approach this challenge, to see if you fit into our culture, because that's really important. The people, even if you are the best at security ever, I usually have someone that can talk to people, listen to them, and has empathy than someone who's a jerk and tells everyone no, or you have to follow exactly what I say. This is a two-way conversation. You need to be able to build up trust with my teams. Otherwise, I don't trust you to work with them. In the last couple of minutes, usually about 5 minutes of an interview, I will give you a chance to ask me questions. And you really should take this opportunity, because I hate it when candidates don't ask me questions. This looks really bad. You want a new job and you are not curious about what it is to work with me and the team, what our culture is and stuff like that, or how your success will be measured, your impact. So you should really ask questions. What questions? It really depends on what you want to understand, but here are 3 areas that you could ask about. For example, culture. What is the working culture in the security org? How do people work with each other? How do decisions get made? You could ask about how is the relationship between the security org and the product engineering org, and that's always an interesting one to get an answer to, or it's sometimes tough to answer as the interviewer too. But it tells you something important about the job where you'll be spending most of your time. You could also ask questions about performance. For example, how your performance or success will be measured. Or about challenges. There are a couple great questions here, and you should certainly do a little bit soul finding, what you're really curious about. But challenges, what kind of things do you hope to solve by hiring the candidate? What are things that you want to solve, or what is the most important thing for you right now that you would like to solve? I sometimes phrase that if I'm asking questions like that, like myself to my own leadership. If you had a magic wand and you had one wish, what would you do with that? You could change anything. Gets people thinking. That's fantastic. Product security and cyber security in general is a very, very broad field. There are so many different things that an interviewer could ask you, and to prepare that you need to focus a little bit. And the most important recommendation when preparing for an interview is look at the job advertisement. The hiring manager intentionally listed out expectations there. Go read that. Figure out exactly what you need to prepare, and then use what you've learned in this video to practice these things. Ask a friend to interview you. Do mock interviews. It helps a lot to practice this. Also, build up your technical understanding. Figure out how to do threat modeling better. So cybersecurity is a really broad discipline. And at the end, it takes a lot of curiosity and hard work to get good at this. And I love it the most if candidates show me that they have this curiosity, or maybe even this passion for cybersecurity, to really secure the systems and do the right thing for the customers, to protect the data and to protect the business too. And if you can show that in the interview, you will certainly leave a lasting impression with the interviewer. So do that and good luck.